everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Teach, Sleep, Repeat. My name is Dylan.
And my name is Hayden.
And we're starting to sing because we've got to get something that's different because we're over 100 episodes in.
And we start the same way every single time.
Do you ever think, like, on this note, genuinely now, that we'll ever run out of things to do episodes about?
I used to. Because I feel like we used to be like, oh, we've got to do one episode on each like thing, and things are going to run out.
There's a behaviour thing. We can't do behaviour again.
Yeah.
No, it turns out we can 57 times, and we'll do it again today. We're going to do it again today, so I can't wait to talk about that.
I just think there's always stuff that comes up.
Yeah,
I don't
always.
know. We famously don't put much thought into.
Do you know what? I want to challenge this quickly because we always like have this joke of, well, we don't put much thought into it. Do you know what? We put so much thought into our amateur episodes when we decide what we're doing.
What I mean is we don't sit there and plan advance. I bet a lot of podcasts have schedules. They're like, we've got our next 10 episodes planned out, whereas we kind of just go off of like, okay, what's actually interesting right now when we'll talk about it this week.
Yeah. Or what do we really have a burning desire to chat about? And I think that's helping us. And do you know how I know that's helping us?
Ooh.
It's boosting our reviews.
Oh,
that's for sure.
Reviews?
And there is just one thing. Yeah, I know. Listen, guys, we said reviews for a long time, but it really does help us. So we don't have a sponsor for this podcast. Yes, if I want to sponsor us, that's how you can get in touch. But we don't have a sponsor. So just a very, very quick message from me as the host. We've got you, the co-host to the host, but as the host of this podcast,
the assistant,
the assistant to the co-host. That would make me a co-host, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you're a co-host.
That's a shame. Anyway, could you please leave us a review because it really helps us, and we see the numbers of teachers listening to this podcast, and the amount of messages we get from people saying they enjoy the podcast is insane. But it just doesn't quite match up with those review numbers. And it really, really helps us when someone lands on our podcast and they see that big number, that just gives us so much clout. So it would really help us if you could just leave us a review on Spotify. Apple Podcasts allow you to even write a little short segment, a paragraph. Yeah. I can't tell you how powerful that is for us. And as someone myself who used to ignore these messages whenever I used to listen to podcasts or have businesses say it to me, now as a business owner and a podcast owner,
I still ignore them. Oh, sorry, that's not what you're going to say.
What I'm saying, Hayden.
Yeah.
I realize how important they are.
Yeah,
and I do go out of my way now to try and leave reviews on businesses I use, etc. Because do you know what? I'd say that is the biggest driver.
Yeah, I agree. I did it for a kebab the other day.
No, you didn't.
I did.
No,
I had a kebab and I was like, do you know what? This is such a nice kebab. I did.
That's amazing.
Because I know it was on like Deliveroo or Just Eat, whatever.
God.
And
it always pops up at the end, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I had that thought. And I was like, do you know what?
Yeah.
That was the best kebab I've ever had in my life. That was a really, really nice kebab.
What made it a good kebab?
It just tasted so good.
Can I ask you, were you sober?
Very sober.
It's, kebabs when you've had a drunken night out, it's very normal.
No.
Completely sober.
No, every now and then we like to treat ourselves to a chicken cheese wrap.
Yeah.
Okay, to be very specific.
Yeah.
You know what I'm like. I'll get the same thing every single time.
Okay, tell me exactly what's in it then.
Chicken cheese, and then it was an option, all the salad or not. I was like, yes, please, all the salad. Typically like red cabbage and lettuce and a bit of cucumber, tomato.
Okay, sauce?
Onions, and then a bit of chili sauce.
Chili sauce?
And I always get that from any kebab shop. Not that I eat kebabs that often, but I've been to a few. and it was just, for some reason, by far the nicest kebab I've ever had, to the point where then a week later I was itching to get it again. I ordered it again and it was just as nice.
Oh, did you leave a review after the first time?
I did it twice. I did it twice. I was so happy. I was so happy with this kebab. The first time I left a review.
How did you leave a second one? Did it let you do it again?
Every time you order, apparently it lets you rate that order.
Oh my God, imagine if every time we listen we could get a review. That'd be amazing.
Every single time.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, reviews really do matter. If kebab shops, podcasts, whatever.
If Hayden can leave 2 reviews for the same kebab, you guys can leave 1 for this podcast for over 100 episodes.
That's it, isn't it? That's it.
Right, Hayden, before we crack on, very excited to talk to Gráinne later from Teacher Tapp and get some insights. That'd be really, really good. Let's just chat about your week. You had a story you wanted to mention.
Yeah, okay. So last week, I was moaning because we had mock sats this week that's just gone. So we've done the mock sats and all that.
Because you got home and it wasn't kebab for dinner.
It wasn't kebab for dinner. It wasn't kebab for dinner. Yeah. And I had loads of marking to do. Not that I took it home. It was still at school. Anyway, so in the week, I was talking to the kids, and it was all very official because it's our proper mock sats, and
which is a good thing. I know we're joking.
I think it's a good thing. Actually, it really just familiarised them with the whole.
Yeah, because when they do it for real, it's not brand new.
Yeah, and we have the craziest seating plan. We use like 7 different rooms, adults everywhere. So it actually is just kind of good for the kids to know. In the real one, by the way, we're all going to be stressed. Can you just make sure you take your chair and you go here? That's where you're going to be. So it's good. Anyway, one of the things they do, they fill in the papers properly as well on the front. Normally in mock sats, I just say, can you just put your first name on it? Like I know who you are. Like don't do the
like
DFE
school number. Yeah,
like DFE number. There was, can I fill in DFE number? What's my date of birth? I forgot. I'm like, normally I'm like, this is not the real thing, so can we just get on with it? This one, I made them do it properly.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, look, one of my other teachers in the year group, our head of year, I was like, I was taking the mick out of her because we have a good relationship. I was like, look, she's like super panicky and thinks that some of you might spell your names wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So she has made these little cards. It's got the DFE number on it for you. It's got your first name, your middle name, your last name. I was like, guys, listen, I know you don't need this and whatever I say, but they're there anyway. I'm going to hand them out, do the right thing. Can you just write your names on the thing? And before I handed them out, one of the kids, and I'll use a different name just so it's, anonymity and all that. One of the kids was like, like sort of laughing with me, like, so how do you spell George? Which was, the middle name, with the actual middle name of the child or something else. But, just like, okay, well, maybe we do need these cards. And I was like, okay, this teacher was doing the exact right thing because you clearly don't know how to spell your own names. It just made me laugh.
That's question one of the SATs. That's the first mark.
I spell your middle name. Half of them got it wrong. Crikey. I just thought, here we go.
You do sometimes think, like, how often do you write a middle name, I suppose? Yeah, middle names are kind of pointless, aren't they?
Yeah.
I've got to say,
they're a bit weird.
It's very sentimental. I know people like middle names for a reason. Maybe they want to name it after someone. When a middle name's sentimental, I kind of get it. And
did you give Rory a middle name?
No, we didn't. Because, again, like, who do you pick?
Yeah.
We could have picked like 4 or 5 different men in his life who were like, we want to honor with this, middle name. But, I don't know. I think when it's sentimental, it's nice. When it's like aesthetic, I mean, I personally just wouldn't do that. But I know some people who choose a middle name because
it just flows.
Yeah, right? It flows, and they also couldn't decide between two. And they're like, well, it's okay. Have a middle name.
That's fair enough. You know what? There's not much to it, really, is there? Like with River, we just went down more the sentimental route, and a bit of that as well. It was like, it flows quite nicely. Yeah. And it was just an homage to Lawrence Nat, who passed away quite young. So it was like, okay, let's use that name.
Yeah, we just accidentally touched hands, and I'm contemplating ending this whole thing.
Yeah. Starting the whole podcast again
because that's not something I wanted to do. So I'm going to very quickly talk about my week in school. Again, I talked last week about how it was quite normal and it plodded along.
Yeah.
I feel like I've managed to continue that. It feels quite good. It's just going on with it. Pretty cool. Not much to report. Yeah. So what I did on Instagram is I just put out there a question box on our stories for all our followers. If you don't follow us on Instagram, go over there and have a look because we post loads of reels and clips from the podcast and harvest information that I'm about to show you. And I asked for some questions for a Q&A because it's always good to lead up a bank.
Love that.
I don't know whether we're going to do a Q&A episode or we're going to take some stuff and use it in this episode. But the responses, we've flicked through them, were genuinely unreal.
Yeah, and loads as well.
Yeah, loads of them, and loads of questions and loads of really, really good questions sprinkled in with some funny ones, which is exactly, you've read us like a book. Every now and then, let's get a funny one up. And what we're going to do then, because we had so many, we'll bank them. We might do a Q&A episode in the future. We might sprinkle them into the next few episodes and see what works for us. So we'll let you know what we choose.
We don't plan ahead, so we don't know yet.
Don't let the curtain fall. The mask is slipping. But there was one question that really stood out for a couple of reasons. Okay. One, because it was a really good question. I think it's something we'd like to talk about, but also we are literally going to talk about it with Gráinne in a second when we talk about Teacher Tapp. And the question is this, it's from Max. Are head teachers losing touch with regular teaching staff? And a quick preface here, Hayden and I have spoken multiple times off podcast because, believe it or not, we do speak when the microphones are off as well sometimes. And you know what is sometimes we do think to ourselves, are we portraying SLT as out of touch, always wrong, in a bad place, coming from a bad place, when we don't actually think that? So this question was really interesting because...
What do you think then? You're kind of alluding to the idea that you don't think that.
No, I'm leaning to the idea that I think sometimes we portray the negatives too much and we don't let people know that there are positives out there. Right. But I think I'm leaning into this still because my initial reaction to this, are head teachers losing touch with regular teaching staff, is on the whole, yes. Yeah, because it's natural. It's going to happen. I'm not even blaming them or saying it's malicious. I'm saying it's going to happen. The longer you are outside of the classroom, you're going to have different priorities and different outlooks on teaching.
Do you think that's happening? It's like there's an element of this question where I'm like, are they alluding to the idea that it's happening more now than it used to? So do you think that that's always been a problem, or do you think in only modern times head teachers are losing touch?
I remember being in my primary school when I was becoming a teacher. I went back to my initial primary school to do some training days or something. I can't remember. I think you had to get 10 days before you went into the course.
Yeah, that's right.
And I remember speaking to who was my year 6 teacher, who had become the head teacher in the time between.
Oh, cool.
So was my year 6 teacher when I was in year 6 and was now the head teacher when I was training. And he said he just said to me, what's my job title? And I said, you're the head teacher. And he was like, yeah, I'm the head teacher. And his point was he doesn't feel like he is a head teacher anymore. And if you just change how you say the word, a head teacher, that implies that you're teaching. You're doing lots of teaching still. You're in charge of the teachers and you are the head teacher. And he said the job's morphed to more of an office job. His job's admin. A lot of head teachers now, their job is admin. It's SEN. It's logging things. It's logging behavior. It's sorting out behavior. It's admin. And it used to be that he was teaching half the time, or the head was teaching half the time and was timetabled in and would go around the class and do the teaching. I think, again, I'd love to see some data on this in the future. It seems like head teachers are teaching less than ever. And because of that, the natural outcome will be that they have different experiences in school. And therefore, they will lose touch with teaching opinion because they're not in the classroom teaching as much.
That makes sense. Well, you're in luck because we're going to be looking at some data soon. It's not quite on exactly that, but we're going to talk to Gráinne from Teacher Tapp in a minute. And I know that she's got some insights that are more to do with, maybe this answers your question a bit more in a different way, is the idea that head teachers and maybe SLT in general don't think in the same ways as teachers. So they're losing touch because they no longer align. That kind of idea. And I know that Gráinne's got some good data on that.
I mean, I can't wait. I think what we should do is dive straight in. So Gráinne, we've met Gráinne at a bet. We had a quick chat at the Teacher Tapp stand. That was really nice. We did a short reel there. She's amazing. She's so passionate. She has got so many statistics from teachers. We're going to get her to explain exactly what Teacher Tapp is, if you're not sure what we're talking about when we say Teacher Tapp. And I think we should just dive straight into chatting with her.
Let's talk to her now.
So we're here with Gráinne from Teacher Tapp. Hello, I'm so excited. This is a chat I've wanted to have for a long time. Could you just introduce yourself and what Teacher Tapp is for anyone who's thinking, wait, what is this app?
Of course. So I'm Gráinne Hallahan. I was a teacher. I was an English teacher, which is, obviously in my opinion, the best subject. I did that for about 10 years. And then I left the classroom. I had too many children and they wouldn't let me have part-time. So I was a bit cross. So I left and then I was doing things. I was like blogging for TES and I was doing a bit of writing. And then TES were like, do you want to be our senior, our content writer? And I was like, oh yeah, definitely. This sounds like fun. So I went to TES and I did that for about 5 years. And now I'm at Teacher Tapp. And as you said, it's an app, but what is Teacher Tapp? So Laura and Becky, who are our founders, Laura McInerney and Becky Allen, they wanted to know, why do so many teachers leave the classroom? Teachers leave. We can't find out why. You can't call them up and be like, hey, why did you go? So they figured they needed to work out how to talk to teachers, how to find out like what's going on. And that's why we have Teacher Tapp. It's really popular. We ask 3 questions once a day, and those questions will be about your life at school, what you think about education policy, what you want to see happening in education, and then you get to see the findings, which is my favourite bit because I'm so nosy. I like seeing what everyone else said, and we know from talking to our teachers that that's the bit they often share with their senior leadership team, their friends, and they say, hey, look, we're doing it this way, but other people are doing it in different ways. Teaching can be really lonely and really isolating, but Teacher Tapp lets you see what's going on in other schools and gives you a bit of a chance to vent too.
Fantastic. I love Teacher Tapp, by the way. I use it every day. I have that reminder set on my phone where it pings up again at 7 because I always forget in the day to do it. So it comes up at 7 o'clock and I'm there answering those questions. Like you said, it literally takes a few seconds. And then you can look at the results from yesterday, which I always like doing because I like to see if the way I think is the same as everybody else. Sometimes I'll pick something that's like the least common. I'm like, oh, I've done something different. I'm against the grain. Everyone else thinks this. So it's always really good to look at. But you're here today. You've got some insights with you. We were just talking about sort of the differences in how we talk about this a lot, by the way, about SLT and how we feel about things as teachers and how sometimes that doesn't marry up. I'm aware that you've come with some data today. So can you hit us with an interesting insight from Teacher Tapp that we can talk about?
So these are the things that I thought were particularly like, oh gosh, look at this. And we're thinking about behaviour outside of the classroom today. And we've been asking teachers about what they think their school leadership top priority for improvement should be. And when you just look at classroom teachers in both primary and secondary, they both say it's behaviour. It's behaviour during lessons and it's behaviour outside of lessons. Primary school teachers are slightly less likely to say behaviour outside of lessons compared to secondary, and that makes sense because, there's some big differences there because you've got the lesson changeovers become more of a behaviour issue in secondary. But both of them are like, yes, behaviour. Middle leaders, yes, behaviour. Senior leaders, The most common answer there was adaptive teaching.
Wow.
Yeah, that's their top. They think that's the top priority for school improvement.
So
And
why? That's so interesting.
So, I think there's a lot to be said about when you become a senior leader, you are at a point in your career where normally behaviour is less of an issue for you.
Sure.
You might see that behaviour is a problem for other teachers, but I do think there's an element of, I was good at it. I found, I found behaviour something that I could conquer. I got on top of it. Why can't other people? And who becomes successful senior leaders? They're the people that have stayed in the classroom and kept on going. So usually have a little bit of
sure.
like kudos around the school as well. So when they come into a room, behaviour looks really good. Are they seeing the real picture of what behaviour is like? Like, if you observe a lesson, you never ever see that lesson as it is normally, because you are observing the lesson, because you are in the room. Unless you're in like a secret little back room with a one-way window, you're not going to see like what kids behave like when there's not a senior leader in the room. So there's also a part of like, you don't really understand fully what behaviour is like, and it might be more of a problem to classroom teachers and senior leaders. And there's a final reason why I think we get this disconnect. There's an attitude perhaps that if we get the teaching right and if we get the curriculum right, then behaviour will follow. So for senior leaders, their strategy might be more based on, right, we need to get the curriculum, we need to get adaptive teaching in. If we can do all of these things, then behaviour will improve. And that's their strategy. That's the way that they're tackling it. So perhaps that's why we get this disconnect there.
I think that's a much nicer way of putting it, because when I first had a look at this data, I got my back up straight away, because my first thought was, it's just that trust thing. Like, do you know what? They don't know what's going on in the classroom. That must be what it is. And SLT, they just want to blame teachers. It was this idea of blame in my head of like, it's just, they want to blame teachers. They think teachers are the reason that things aren't great in education right now. It's not the children. And then the teachers are saying, no, it's the children. I can't do my job properly. But actually, I think the way you've said it has really eased my mind a little bit, and maybe thought maybe it's not about blame. But you're so right, because when I have an observation, in fact, whenever the head teacher is in my room, obviously the kids behave differently. They're not stupid. Like they know the hierarchy of a school as well. Like for the same reason, if go in the sort of opposite direction, when it's not the classroom teacher and it's either a supply teacher or a teaching assistant or even just an unfamiliar teacher, I generally find the behaviour is worse.
Yeah.
So I can see why that warped opinion that sort of might be there.
Kids are really oddly, strongly hierarchical as well, aren't they? Like they really believe that there's like the respect should change depending on who they're speaking to. And from when I was in the classroom, like that was something that I used to always challenge. And it's that it doesn't matter who you're talking to. You should speak to me the same way as you speak to the head teacher. You should speak to the cleaners and to the cafeteria staff the same way as you speak to me. Like you don't speak to someone differently just because you perceive them to be in a different hierarchy. Because I was an English teacher, we used to talk about this a lot because it comes up a lot in literature. But I used to find it really funny if you ask kids where they put themselves in the hierarchy of the school. Have you ever asked kids to do that?
No, I've never done that.
No.
Oh, try it. This is everyone should try this. Like put a pyramid up on the board and say, like, where does everyone go in the school? And every year I did this. So we used to teach, to do it for inspector calls. So it came up every year, every year, and do it with the kids. Where do you put yourselves? And they would always put themselves above the cafeteria staff.
Wow. Yeah.
You're mad. It's like, no.
There was this moment I remember in school so vividly that this is interesting you're saying this, and this is secondary school now. Obviously, Hayden and I are primary school teachers. You come from more of a background with older children. But I vividly remember from secondary school, my teachers having those kind of opinions and telling me them. And I do feel like it molded my view on society in a good way, in terms of I was sat in a chemistry class. This is a chemistry class, right? Not even English. English, you're kind of making a link there with the literature and the hierarchies. I was sat in a chemistry class, and my chemistry teacher, her name was Mrs. Cousins. And I remember her saying, and I don't know the context, but I remember this line so clearly. And she said, if you think about what these two people do for society, who's actually more important? And she said, is it the person working in the bank, or is it the bin man collecting your rubbish off the streets? And her point was, naturally, she knew everyone would think bin men, dustmen, cleaning up. Oh, that's lower on the hierarchy than big wigs, making money, moving money around, wearing their suits. And her point was just, firstly, that's wrong. Everyone plays a role in society. But secondly, actually, if we're going to make some kind of hierarchy here, sometimes the lowest perceived jobs and careers are doing more of a service for you as a person and as an individual. And that's stuck in my head so much over time. And yeah, I remember children in my class, one person would shout out and say, "Oh, when I'm older, I'm going to make more than you anyway as a teacher." And I just remember seeing all this. And you're right, though, as teachers, I wonder what role you think we have to play in shaping these outlooks. And when we have SLT, these children will grow up to be our SLT. These children will grow up to be our cleaners. These children will grow up to be our cafeteria staff. How much of an impact do you think us as teaching staff can have on those outcomes and those views of society as they grow up? And how much do you think is just entrenched and we're kind of just fighting a fire that won't go out?
Oh, no, I think it's huge. I think you can be really influential. And that's why you've got to be really careful about what you say and your reactions to things, like when they tell you stuff. And it's making sure that you're recognizing your own privileged position that you are in, of having had a degree and gone and got a job and, all of those things. And I think I was really fortunate that I went to a school where I mixed with a lot of different sorts of people. And before I was a teacher, I worked and did lots of different types of jobs. I worked all through my GCSEs and my A-levels and my degree. And I think it gives you a better insight into how other people view education. And there's a risk, there's a trap that you can fall into as a teacher if you've been very successful at school and you've been very successful when you went to teacher training college and you've gone back to school and you see, like, school is, if you just listen, then it's fine. My eldest came home when she was in primary school and said, "I figured it out. If you just listen to what the teacher says, then you understand maths." And that's why people don't understand maths. They're just not listening. I'm like, sort of.
I've got some data for you.
But this, you've got to understand what it's like. You've got to try and put yourself in the shoes of that kid who goes from lesson to lesson to lesson and can't actually read and finds every single lesson a struggle and goes home and their parents also struggle to read. And that's why they're not reading at home. And the aspirations to be successful at school, why would they aspire to do that when they've got no role models in their immediate social circles that value school? So, I think that's really important. And but then equally, I remember teaching war poetry and I must have gone really enthusiastic that lesson. Maybe I had extra coffee, but I was really going this is really important. These soldiers and it's so noble. And then it was parents' evening the next day. And this grandmother had brought in little Charlie and she was like, "He now wants to join the army."
You having an impact?
What have I done? That's not what I meant. But it's a great career. I grew up in a garrison town, so I've got loads of friends who went into the army, and I talked about that, and I was being really, really enthusiastic. But you're in a very, very privileged position to have so much influence over the kids, and you should always role model how to speak to people, how to be respectful. And I think they watch you for cues. If you're rude to people, they'll think that's an okay way to behave. And I think definitely all about politeness and manners and what we expect from politeness from the kids. If you're not polite to other adults and to other people in the room, then they'll just think that's an okay way to behave.
I think that's good to hear. I think sometimes we take that for granted. Yeah. There's as teachers, there's a million jobs. You have a million hats on. And I think sometimes it's easy to think, do you know what? This hat's less important, or I haven't got time for space for this hat. Do you know what I mean? And actually it's just good to hear that and remind ourselves it's important. So just going back to the, because I'm really interested in this data still, the top priorities from schools and how it's different between SLT and teachers massively, between behaviour and adaptive teaching. Obviously, Teacher Tapp's been around a while. Do you have any insights on how that has changed over time? And is there anything interesting that's come out of that?
We do. And I hate delivering the bad news, but there's bad news tied up in this. So prepare yourselves. Behaviour is becoming more and more concerning over time. So we asked this in 2023, 2024, and then this year in 2025. Same time of the year as well, March. Once you're past that nice golden time when they first come back in September, I'll do anything you say. Yeah. And behaviour is creeping up, so we can see an increase over time for behaviour becoming more and more concerning.
Is that across the board?
And in primary and in secondary.
So
we had a secondary, it's kind of stayed a bit more stable, but in definitely
it's higher anyway, isn't it? It's more of a problem anyway in secondary.
We'll get onto that a little bit later. Yeah. There is this perception that behaviour is a tough thing in secondary, and so it's stayed pretty high, but it's definitely creeping up in primary. And this is also reflected in other questions that we ask. So we don't just ask like, what do you think is important? We also ask things like, did you give out, did you tell a child off? Did you have to send a child out of the class? Did you have to call for SLT? Did you give a sanction in your last lesson? And in primary, it is creeping up and up. So we saw a bit of a dip over the pandemic because things were a bit like squirrely then, but it's rising up and up year on year since we've returned. And in secondary, it seems kind of more stable. So there's definitely the sense that in primary, behaviour is becoming increasingly more challenging. And particularly when we break this down further, we can see it's more so in Key Stage 1 than Key Stage 2.
Wow,
that's interesting.
Because just for context here, Hayden and I are Key Stage 2 teachers, and I would say in general I go along with what the trends that we're seeing. I think if I was to think now as a teacher, how often do I have to impose sanctions or warnings or whatever the behaviour policy is in your school? It's definitely more than I used to. And I sometimes look introspectively at that and think, am I getting worse as a teacher? And I think that's a problem, because you do think that. You think, well, is it because of me?
Yeah.
And I think the reason why I love Teacher Tapp and I love data is because it shifts from being anecdotal to, oh, my friend said behavior is fine, but I think it's getting worse. Maybe I'm the problem. Then we see thousands of people giving their opinions. Oh, no, wait. Okay. It's not just me.
It's
and I
more
think
systemic.
This is where the podcast as well in general, people messaging us, they go, oh my gosh, you think this too? I thought it was just me in this school and I'm really struggling. So this data, not only do we see the trends you're saying, do you find people get in touch with you and talk to you about how, even though it might be bad news, it's reassuring?
Yeah. And I think that's going back to what we said at the start, like teaching can be quite lonely. Like it is just you in a room with loads of kids all day. And you don't get that adult also saying to you like, oh gosh, that was tough. Yeah. Like you can go into the staff room, but everyone's got their different sort of view. Like they've all had different days. You can all sort of go, oh, that was difficult, but it's quite difficult to be that honest among your colleagues, because there's all those kind of like staff room politics. You might not want to expose yourself as saying like, I'm struggling. It can be really difficult to speak honestly about your classroom among work friends. So who do you talk to about? Like you can go home and talk to your spouse, but they might, or your partner, or your friends and things, but they might not all be teachers. They might not get what you're talking about. It is definitely something we see. We get messages in all the time saying, this is happening in my school. And people tell me how therapeutic it is just to be able to go, yes, on the app. Like, yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yes,
it's true.
A kid bit me, hit me, did this and this and this. Yes, they did. And it's a bit scary sometimes when the data is worrying, but if we're all in it together and we've all got the same problems, then the solutions are probably quite similar, right? Like there are things we can do, and it's especially when we talk about behaviour, there are things that we can do in terms of training and classroom adaptations and the system for diagnosing children with additional educational needs. I mean, we all know it's an overhaul.
Yeah. Sorry, what system? What system?
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's a system, but it's broken. I suppose that's the thing I was going to come on to ask you about is Teacher Tapp is unbelievable for that pure data. And what role do you think you have in that next step? Like you're mentioning things we can do then to fix that. Do you see yourselves as like the indicators of real life, and other people can go from there? Or do you also see it as something that you're passionate about is then to try and fix what we see?
I definitely think it's about saying, look, this is the actual problem. We write to the DfE, to the Department of Education, we write them out, find our findings and say, look, this is what's important.
That's brilliant.
Every time they call for evidence, we put our evidence together and submit it. We've been on the educational select committees and given evidence in Parliament. Like, we know that they listen to us. We know that they might not always like what we've got to say, but it's important that
it's real.
We're presenting the views of teachers, because they're the ones in the classroom. It's really hard to collect data on teachers. Like, I think what Teacher Tapp does, even like taking a step back from it, it's amazing that we can do this, because it's really difficult to get data off teachers real time in as things are going on. And things like the special educational needs, like explosion, if you like, we can see the rise in the number of children per class that are on the SEND register. The SEND register is a wild west. Like, there's no standardized, like, to be on the SEND register, you need to have this. Every school does it differently.
So true.
And when you make EHCPs harder to get and make the SEND register completely like free for all of those children who don't meet the threshold for an EHCP, which is loads of them, absolute loads, are then on the SEND register, but no one's collecting that data on the SEND register. So we have data on this, and we can even see things like class size and the number of children that are on the SEND register versus class size. And we're doing work at the moment actually looking at this in more detail. And it means that we can then say, these are the problems that schools are seeing. This is where we need help. These many classes didn't have a teaching assistant. Whenever we say or put out questions about, like, if you could employ another member of staff or give money in this area, teaching assistants is always like number 2 or number 3 option. That's really, really high. And I think that speaks to the loss that teachers who've been teaching for enough time to remember what it was like to have teaching assistants, sometimes multiple teaching assistants in your classroom. Remember those, Dizzy?
Mad.
Whoa, what more help? Jeez.
Yeah, that was great. And having somebody that you regularly worked with, and you would sit with your lesson plans and say, look, I would like you to do this and this and this. You had this opportunity to work with another professional with your children. And, you know, I accept some of the criticisms about the system that we had when we had more classroom assistants, and it didn't always work well, and not everyone worked well with their TAs, etc., etc. But it did do a lot of good too. And it made it possible to manage a class when you had children with additional needs. Yeah. Whereas now I would think many teachers would say it's actually impossible to teach. You're just managing behaviour, and isn't that bleak?
Was the solution to the broken system to get rid of the support? I don't think it was.
They did more good. I think that's the way to put it, isn't it? Yeah. Was there some negative elements? But did they do more good than bad? But yes, like astronomically.
Do you know what I find tricky now? It might be interesting to see the data. If you're pulling data from this, maybe we'll talk in the future as well. We'll have another chat. But what I found more trickier than ever is managing my teaching assistant. And maybe newer teachers will find that, where it's so inconsistent, the support that I'm getting as a teacher, that there'll be days where I have no one, and there'll be lessons where I have no one. And then maybe I'll get a teaching assistant for maths, which is halfway through the day. Then I'll go again for the afternoon. I'm really struggling I feel like my management of a teaching assistant is worse than ever before, even though I'm more experienced.
And your skill of doing that.
Yeah, because I it's so sporadic when I've got to do it, if that makes sense.
And just to add on that, sometimes you said you might go days where you're talking about the sort of inconsistencies in the sort of week. Sometimes I go a whole year.
Yeah.
I like this year, I don't have a TA in any subject at any point in the day.
Yeah.
So it's like, next year, would I be a bit more de-skilled? Like, probably, yeah. I won't have interacted or managed a teaching assistant for an entire year. Like,
and that's where schools try and put teaching assistants in places they think they need them most, and that's the right way to do it, because they're strapped for cash. And let's say we don't have enough for everyone. That what issue we have here is there's a separation between the need of assistance and help because of your attainment levels, and the need for assistance and help because of your special educational needs or educational healthcare plan. And those don't always overlap. Like, how often have you heard someone say, oh, they've got an education healthcare plan, but they don't really need support because they're quite intelligent. They just crack on themselves, but they might need that for a different reason. You might have a child with diabetes who needs a one-to-one to keep them alive in those situations where they have hypos. It doesn't always overlap. And what I see a lot is maybe schools are more worried about attainment and putting teaching assistants and classroom helpers in places where they want a lower ratio to get better SATs results, at the detriment of there are some children who maybe are going to get expected, and it's not the best use of our money because we want to get SATs results higher. So we'll move that teaching assistant away from someone who needs it, even though it won't move them attainmently. And that pastoral support, I don't know if you've got any data on this or seen this, Gráinne, I feel like is at an all-time low.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been asking about teaching assistants for a while, and it's really tricky. Like, I'm not 100% happy with our teaching assistant questions. So people who've got teaching assistant questions they want to send in, I've just scribbled down 3 from what you've said. But it's really hard to capture that if we ask, was a teaching assistant in your classroom for the last lesson or in it today, they might have been in for like minutes.
Sure.
Right. So so they might be saying, oh yeah, I've still got one. And we've been looking at, there has been a reduction in the number of teaching assistants, but I think the problem is that the ones we've got left are being spread out really thinly.
Completely. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a tricky one to capture, but it's definitely something that we can see. There's still classes that have got several members of that class on the send register and no teaching assistant at
very,
all.
very normal.
Yeah, I really want to highlight what you said for our listeners again and just really draw people's attention to it, because I'd love to hear what people say, because you have hit the nail on the head with the SEM register. It's so sporadic and seemingly random school from school. I've moved schools, I've been in different schools, and every single school seems to have a different way of recording it, seems to have a different definition of what a child would need to be on the list. That SEN register is so separate to that EHCP, like you said, because it feels like the EHCP boundary is way too high for children getting support, and the SEM register is just filling up with children where, as a class teacher, it feels like I'm given a list and then said, good luck. And that is
they all need support. What, the same support? No.
Yeah, they're different because this child needs that. And you know what, as a teacher, last thing I'm going to say, because I'd love to crack on with some data, Gráinne, I'm sorry, but last thing on this, because as a classroom teacher, the thing that frustrates me the most is the only reason I'm a teacher is because I want to help children. And when I'm given a list of children who need extra help and I physically can't do that, I've got one of two options. I completely burn out and then fail anyway because I've not got the support I need to do it. Or I have to not give them the support I know they need. And both are devastating.
I think we don't talk enough about the fact that you often are given a list of children that you're going to teach in your class, and their needs don't they don't overlap, like they're actually in contradiction of each other. So, you're told that this child needs to have regular changing tasks because they're attention. This child needs to have long time to like settle into a task and like time to develop. Like, well, I can't do both of those things. Like those two are very, very different. And one like needs to be able to work with like noise in the background, and the other one needs to have silence. Like, well, I can't do both of these things. The rise of ear defenders, we're going to ask again about the ear defenders, because that was something that really like flew up over COVID.
Yeah, that's increased.
But is it going back down again now? Or are we using those ear defenders to try and balance those kinds of situations where there's children that do make a lot of noise and have to be allowed to make that noise, and there's children who can't tolerate noise? Like, what is that classroom experience like then for that child who can't tolerate noise? And in this sort of artificial deafness, like that's a real concern. And how difficult it is for them to then move on to other parts of their life, just generally. Anyway, it's
you'll have to let us know when you find out.
It's fascinating.
There is one piece of data you sent through. I'm itching to talk about it because I want to know what you think about this, because I was just looking at the numbers, and it was about the equipment. It was about break times and lunch times, and how you've got some data over sort of 6-year period here on how and what equipment students use during break times and play times. Can you just break down some of this data for us and tell us what you think?
Okay, so we asked teachers about the typical things you might find in a playground. So ropes for doing jump rope, like skipping, bringing your own ball, having hopscotch marked out and things like that, like the old snail. Who knows what game you're meant to play on that snail, but we invent loads, right?
It doesn't matter, just run around in circles.
The obstacle course, which at my daughter's school is always roped off and taped off, and normally due to my middle daughter breaking it. The climbing equipment, providing balls for the kids, footballs, tennis balls, netballs, basketballs, and then providing ropes and elastics for jumping games. Sure. Now, we saw a drop in every single area.
Wow.
Over the 6-year period?
Over the 6-year period. It's gone down and it's gone down further. So there's fewer schools that are providing these things for the children. And
what does that tell you?
Well, we also asked, have you noticed there's a reduction of children playing playground games like hopscotch skipping? And the older you were, the more likely you are to say, yes, definitely, it's decreased significantly. And we stuck in an open question because we're like, what's going on here, guys? Like, tell us the story. And it seems that there's been a drop in kids knowing these games already when they came to school. So like previously kids knew how to play hopscotch, kids knew how to skip, and it was something that they played elsewhere and they were playing when they got to school. That's changed. Lots of teachers said that children are more interested in having tablets, and they'll be that's how they play now. So physically playing just isn't the thing that they want to do. Lots said they don't have the staff to teach them how to do these games or to supervise these games. And then, of course, this won't surprise you, but money. So balls, skipping ropes, all that equipment, it costs money. And if it breaks, you've got to replace it and then just not getting replaced. I had reply after reply after reply saying our equipment's broken and we can't afford to fix it.
Do you think it's just a mixture of all those things? Like, do you think all of those responses that you got there are just valid and they're all just contributing to why those numbers have just gone down and down and down? Or do you think there's like a particular prevalent cause for this number going down?
I think that people are generally a lot more sedentary, and I think children generally copy what they see around them, and so it's like it's a trend that just grows. So if the majority aren't playing, then everyone's going to follow it.
Sure.
You can't play many games just on your own. You don't want to be that kid who's just playing on their own. Also, I think kids use parks less. I think actually playing is less common. Children don't have the same freedom as they did 5-10 years ago of being able to just take themselves off to the park and playing unsupervised. As a society, we're much more like scathing and skeptical about children that are out on their own. You know, you only have to be on a couple of Facebook groups for your local community that there's children out and they're all
and children are existing in this world and doing fun things.
They were kicking a ball around, and actually, I don't like that.
Yeah, honestly.
One teenager looked at me. The other week, something really kicked off on our local Facebook groups. Some children had been playing by the beach and had left some things on the wall, went to the shop and came back, and there was like 100 comments about these kids who'd left their things on the wall to go to the shop and come back. Like, this is outrageous. They left all that. And
yeah, honestly,
they are just existing. Yeah. So I think that's a big part of it too. But also like the amount of time that kids do spend on screens has risen massively, and we can't underestimate the impact that has on them.
I mean, this will be probably an obvious answer to this question, but do you think that this is intrinsically bad and we should do something about it, or how much of this do you think is just a culture change? And therefore, it's just classic. We're older, they're younger. Every older generation thinks the next generation, they don't do it like we did back in our day. Do you think there's an element of that, or do you think no, this is just bad and we need to intervene and help children?
No, I think this is catastrophic. I think it's really, really bad. So in my other life, I coach athletics, and I see little children. I teach what we call fundamentals because we're putting fun. It's all fun.
Love that.
That's the teacher shining through.
Yeah, I love it. But getting them, so one of the first things we get them to do is to do hopscotch, because hopscotch is really good for balance and coordination, and obviously eventually it's like it leads on to long jump, triple jump, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And I am always horrified at the number of kids that can't hopscotch and don't have the coordination, don't have balance. And when I talk to other coaches about this, it's something that we all agree that we've seen a massive increase in kids that can't balance on one leg.
So true. It's so true, these basic coordination skills.
As teacher, we obviously, as primary school, we teach everything in the end. So nearly every primary school teacher has taught PE. And where it's not a specialism, and we're kind of just doing what we can do, I am consistently shocked to the point now where it actually doesn't shock me anymore, where I'll be teaching year 4 or 5 a PE lesson, and I'll just look and I'll be like, oh, there's a warm-up, we're throwing a ball to each other. Okay, cool. What a lovely warm-up, because we're going to end up doing some different types of throwing. All right, here you go, kids. Here's a ball. Get 2 meters apart, 5 meters apart if you're a bit more confident, whatever it is, and just throw a ball at each other. And over half of them can't throw a ball. And I'm not even exaggerating. Genuinely, like sounds like I'm making a joke. I'm being deadly serious. Where I look at how they throw a ball, I look at literally how they run. Okay, and some children get to 7, 8, 9 years old, and they cannot run. It's not running. It's like stumbling. It's like they've never done it before, and that is, like you said, catastrophic. And I think this is all linked, is the point I'm making. I think you're absolutely right, Gráinne, that the fact children aren't doing this outside of school enough is impacting what we see in school, because in school we've always done 1 or 2 PE lessons a week in school. That's always what's happened. We're not doing way less PE. Maybe we're doing a bit less, but this is fundamentally from, I think, society and having that impact. So as teachers, what can we do? Where do we go from here? Because I don't want to just accept it. But like with so much in teaching, as a teacher, I end up getting frustrated and burnt out because I'm trying to change things that I don't have the power to change. So like, what do you think the small steps we could do to try and make children better at this and try and solve this problem?
I think we've got some really good news coming with there's an opportunity of how we could help this. Now, I'm almost loath to say it because I know we're all just going to go, ugh, but the 30-minute free breakfast club.
Yep.
Funding. What are you doing to us? This is not well thought through, but
extra
you got
work.
30 minutes before school that you could do outdoor PE
True.
with them. Or not even, just games. Just get them to do little running games. And I think the Youth Sports Trust has already got onto this, and I've seen things from them suggesting how you can make your 30-minute breakfast club an active one.
Amazing.
It's reasonably cheap to do. Like, I do a running club for my daughter's school once a week in the morning, and we just do. I rotate the same four sessions, and they don't care. They're just happy. Yeah. We do hare and tortoise. We do like running around the cone, like 1-2 drop, so you get increasingly shorter intervals. We do like balance stuff in between. We call it the hex games. Copyright me. But we do like a little run, and then they balance, and they do a run, and they do some jumps, and like it's just fun, and they're moving, and they go in with really red cheeks, and they've got time just to get changed out of their running stuff into their school uniform. It's done. It doesn't cost anything.
No.
It's really simple. You don't need to be very highly trained to do it.
Don't down yourself, going, you're highly trained.
I like the idea though, like breakfast club being that time for activity.
You know what it will turn into, don't you? We all know what this will turn into. Let's all be realistic for a second, because this is fantastic, and it's one of those things where we should do that. Give it 3 years, there'll be SATs boosters. Yeah, there'll be SATs boosters. Year 6 will be like, we all know this will, and it's horrendous.
We know that moving before school and doing like movement and activity and getting your heart racing improves your educational outcomes. We know it improves maths and English. So to ignore it is just at our peril, and kids will concentrate a lot better. The mums of the little kids, the group that I do, always say, they slept really well last night. Like, fire them out, they'll be better behaved.
It's funny how you sleep when you have no energy.
My kids just aren't sleeping. Yeah. Oh, have they done any exercise, and have they played video games all night? I wonder why.
This is a mystery.
Hopefully, with Teacher Tapp's amazing, right? And I really hope that when all of this breakfast club stuff comes into action, we can harvest some actual information, and hopefully not see what Dylan's saying.
Hey, I don't want this.
I know we don't, but hopefully we won't see that.
And you might be right.
It'll be interesting to find out, exactly how that time actually gets.
Yeah, I wanted to mention one thing, Gráinne, that you'd had said to us about some kind of survey that you're doing in terms of.
Yes. So one way that you can find out what's going on in your school is to ask the children. We have got this. It's called Lunchtime Listen. And it's not about moaning to your colleagues about, your last lesson. It's all about what are kids doing in lunchtimes and break times. It's a short survey. You get to pick. We've got all our best questions for the kids to answer. You can pick them out, stick them on a computer and get them, or do them one by one, throw them through it. But the fun thing, you get to compare how your school answers versus the rest of the country. So the more schools we've got who sign up to it, the better the data for your school is. And it might, by asking these questions, help you see the places where you can improve your lunchtime and break times. And that's, it's really hard to find the time to stop and think, how can we do this better? School's so busy, everything's so busy. There's lots and lots of pressure and lots of pressure points. But here's a chance where you can get some really good data to compare your school to everyone else. What's going on here? What can we do to do things better?
Fantastic. I think you're absolutely right when you say it's at our peril when we ignore this data. I think I guess my last point on this wider scope of all this data we've looked at today is there are some people who will listen to all of this and kind of go, oh yeah. Anyway, crack on. I think one thing we need to do as educators and people in school is not only harvest this data, which Teacher Tapp is doing unbelievably. I think it's now our job to actually action what we see as the problems and to do change for good reasons.
I'll stop dismissing it as well.
Yeah,
it's easy to dismiss it. I don't see it in my school.
Yeah,
Okay, all right, okay. Yeah. Well, here's 10,000 other people. So
I had someone leave a comment on a reel saying, I don't think teaching's changed much in the last 31 years. I think maybe the younger generation are just less resilient. And I just had to comment because I said, do you know what? You've got a valid opinion. Fine. Okay. I disagree with you. You might not think teaching's changed, but there does come a point where you are just wrong. So there is a point. We live in this society where we've got to have both sides, haven't we? We've got to talk about it, and it's got to be 50-50. But why aren't Teach Sit Repeat talking to someone who said that playground games haven't changed over time? Because they have. Because it's a fact. Yeah. We don't need both sides all the time. So that person, you said, I don't think teaching's changed in 31 years. You're completely entitled to your opinion, and you're wrong because we have solid data that it has. So I guess that's my frustration. And maybe as someone who works at Teacher Tapp, sometimes I know you've got to say the right thing, etc. But I'm sure you sometimes feel that frustration too.
And also, I think they're not wrong. Some things haven't changed in 30 years, but lots have. It depends what you're looking at, doesn't it? The chairs are the same.
And that might not be a good thing.
Okay, all the equipment's the same as it was 31 years ago because we haven't bought any new stuff, but everything else.
The stuff that shouldn't be the same is fine.
That's what they meant. It's not changed. We're still using the same textbook.
Yeah, literally.
I've got an overhead projector. Oh God, it's not changed at all.
Does it work? No, and it never did, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Right, Gráinne, I've absolutely loved this because I think we're like you, we're data nerds. We love maths and numbers and taking things in. I think I'm more excited than anything about this as well. I'm not going to lie, because any listeners know we love a quiz. And Gráinne said to us, I prepared you a quiz, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sold. I'm so ready. I know, right? So do you want to what have you got for us?
This is our behaviour quiz. So you're going to have to guess. We're going to do vote 1 or vote 2. So 1, 2, you're going to vote with your hands, or you can say it.
Okay.
And who faces the most disruptive behaviour? Is it primary or secondary?
Secondary.
Yeah, going with number 2.
You're so wrong.
Really?
It's primary. It's primary. All the time, every time, it's primary. And not just by a little bit, it's primary. Primary are more likely to hit, bite, scratch.
Oh
my gosh, yeah. I suppose that's true.
And it makes sense. If you got to secondary school and you started doing that, then you get shit. Primary school teachers face far more disruptive behaviour than secondary schools.
Wow.
Every time we ask.
Do you know what?
I wouldn't have thought that.
Do you know what I think that might be down to? Because we're primary school teachers. So, that person we just said was wrong. Well, let me eat some humble pie because I'm wrong on this as well, clearly. I think sometimes we take what is clearly disruptive behaviour, and because it's so normal to us, maybe we just think to ourselves, oh, that's normal. Yeah, okay.
Because they're 5. That's just 5.
I don't think that as a disruption. But actually, of course it does disrupt me. I'm constantly disrupted when I'm trying to teach a lesson.
True.
I am constantly firefighting stuff. But I see that as part of my job and normal. But actually, if someone was to came in, they go, wow, that's so disruptive. And I'll be like, oh, yeah, it is actually. That's really interesting. Yeah.
I've just got used to having things.
No, they always throw the chair
No,
at me.
nothing's changed.
Well, that's a good one. Well, that's blown my mind. Go on.
Well, you're 1 down so far. Question 2. When is behaviour at its worst in a school? Is it during lessons? Oh, no, sorry. Is it between? Is it between when you're doing changeover between teaching one topic to the next topic, or one lesson to the next lesson, or is it at lunchtime?
I'm going to say, ready? I'm going to vote for
I'm going for 1.
Yeah, in between changeovers.
Yeah.
No.
We're rubbish at this. We need to go with the thing we don't think.
Lunchtime is by far the time when behaviour is its worst.
Gosh, by far as well. We've been humbled. humbled.
We think this is to do with lunchtime assistance and to do with how kids are supervised at lunch, and the ratios dropping of the number of lunchtime assistants that we used to have versus what we have now. And
maybe that hierarchy again, children not respecting people because they think, lunchtime assistants.
Head
teacher.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Wow. And again, from our point of view as primary school teachers, because we've got them wrong, I need to try and justify this somehow. I think it's because we're not remotely involved in that lunchtime. So, out of sight, sometimes out of mind. We hear someone say, oh, this happened at lunch, but I've sorted it. I was like, oh, okay. Whereas that changeover, we're in control then of that, especially as primary school. We're like, excuse me, what's going on here?
Yeah. Just like that.
Okay, this is a very secondary one. So put on your imagine you're in a secondary classroom.
Okay.
What do teachers find more annoying? Kids with mobile phones or kids answering back?
I would go for number 2.
Oh,
gone
okay.
different.
Someone's going to get a point.
I think kids answering back.
And I think kids with phones would be more annoying.
It's answering back.
Yes,
I know what
that does mean I'm better.
Why
than
did you
Dylan.
think that?
I don't know. I just feel like I can imagine mobile phones are much easier to control, whereas answering back, I feel like is intrinsically rude and like I don't know. I guess having mobile phones out is rude, but I think I personally would be less annoyed by that. I don't know. Maybe that's what I thought.
Because you'd have your phone out.
My phone out.
About deep rudeness that is answering back and how it's a much more heightened situation. And like if they're answering you back, it's normally like in front of the rest of the class. You're like, I cannot stand for this. My current obsession is the politeness theory, like positive face and negative face. And this is like what I'm currently like reading lots of blogs about. I used to teach it when I was teaching English language, but I think about it all the time. It's this idea that you have two faces, like you show positive face and you can show negative face. And negative face is like not wanting to be seen to be weak. So you won't ask for something directly. You'll be like, oh, I need to have this, but you don't have to do it. But like, if you could, because you don't want to be told no and not wanting to be given an instruction. It's all about like self-protection. But positive face can like be equally insincere. It can be almost like over the top. Like you want to be seen as being easygoing and nice, and so you're giving like positive face.
I can think of that.
Actually, like underneath, there's like see things.
I'm so angry right now.
Because you don't want to be seen as being weak or vulnerable or could possibly be upset by something. So, and I'm sure this answering back taps into that real deep, like very human, very like part of us that doesn't like being shown up.
What was that whole? I want to go look more. I'm so fascinated by that. What was it called? Positive
it's Brown
face
and
negative.
Nevison, positive face, negative face, and it's like politeness theory. But it's all this sort of behavioural psychology.
That's really interesting. Yeah, because when you were saying those things, I was just inspecting myself, thinking, I've absolutely been in situations where I've done all of these things and not done these things, and there's psychology. It's great.
On Sunday, all of our questions are about politeness and manners.
Oh, there you go.
So we've got a bit of a theme on Sunday for
amazing
questions.
We'll make sure to answer those.
Well, I'm 0.
You're on 1, so infinitely better than you at the moment.
Well, that's it. There's a short quiz. So you're the winner.
That is
well done, Hayden. You won the award.
I mean, between us, we did awfully.
We got 1 out of 6.
We got 1 out, but there we go. It's very interesting, though. I'm glad you asked those questions because they definitely, when you asked that first question, I thought, here we go, easy mode. I got it wrong, and I was like, okay, this has challenged everything.
Humbled. Yeah. I need to go with that guy on TikTok who left me a message. I'm sorry, mate. Sorry, pal.
I get what it's like to be wrong now. Finally, after all these years. Oh dear.
Oh gosh. Well, I must say, thank you so much. Before we do hop off, was there anything you wanted to finish off or mention at all?
No, that's it. If you haven't got Teacher Tapp, download the app, try it, see if you like it, tell your friends about it. It's good fun. And if you do have a question you want to put in the app, message me. You can message me straight through the app, and we can put it in and put it to our teachers.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
I loved that. Statistics, pure data. And yes, I know, look, yes, I got every single question on the quiz wrong. But do you know what? I can accept it because it's rooted in data. It's the actual experiences of what people have. What did you think?
Well, do you know what? Just think about that very last thing. First of all, the chat was amazing. I feel like we had really good conversations about that data. But that very last bit there, and even you're joking about getting the questions wrong. It just reminds me that perceived reality is not always like you're not always right. Do you know what I mean? And I know you're talking about the Instagram comment, but it just highlights to me, like even as a teacher, I was getting this teacher insight wrong. Right? When I get mad at the public for not understanding teaching, do you know what? I get it because they're so much further removed. Right? Of course they're just getting things completely wrong. Like they probably look at secondary schools and go, yeah, behaviour's getting well worse. It's getting worse than ever before. And do you know what? They could actually be completely wrong because I was clearly completely wrong. I was very confidently correct with that, like in my head of that first answer. Like, of course, secondary school pupils are worse behaved. I know they are in my heart. But no, actually, yeah, there's a different reality to that. So it just makes me think we need more of this data. Like if we're ever going to get the public to actually understand what this job is and not hate teachers, which seems to be happening, we need more of this. We need Teacher Tapp to be out there all the time, like presenting real data and kind of doing what you did of being like, yeah, okay, your opinions are great, but here's the truth though.
Yeah.
Like, I love your opinions. They're really nice. Thank you for having your opinions. But here's the reality. Yeah. Like, this is the data. You can't actually argue with this. You can argue about what it means, but you stop saying this data doesn't exist though, because here it is. Yeah. Look.
Yeah. It's exactly the same when we looked at the data of how many hours teachers work. Every single excuse you come up with from people trying to say why it's wrong, it was like, cool. It's not though.
Yeah.
You can have an opinion that table in front of you is yellow.
Yeah.
It's not though.
You can't have an opinion on how averages work. It's just how they work.
Yeah. I think I'm going to pick up on what you said. It's actually what Teacher Tapp does, which I think is super powerful, which kind of we gloss over, is it would allow teachers to be on the same page. Like you said, how can we expect people outside of education to have a real understanding of what's going on if even within education, teachers themselves have different opinions and think that each other are already wrong?
Yeah.
So I think what that objective data does on a large scale like Teacher Tapp is it does just provide you with that backbone to say, okay, look, my management are doing this. They're saying it's because of that. I disagree with that. Where do we go from here? Well, I guess I've just got to do what a manager says.
Yeah.
Okay, well, actually, do you know what? It brings in that third party, which is pure empirical data. And it says, well, do you know what? 95% of schools are doing it this other way. So that's clearly okay as well.
Yeah.
So in this world of where everyone seems to have to be right or wrong, on the right politically, on the left politically, I argue this, you argue that, private schools should get VAT funding, should get a VAT break. They shouldn't. Where it's so binary, what I think this opens up is there's been so many times as a teacher where there have been 5 options as to what to do. And I think none of them are wrong. I think none of the options are incorrect. Yeah, sure, we could replan this English around this text and it might be good for that reason. We could also keep the planning from last year because actually it was really good and it hooked them on this video link that was really inspiring for them. And we got some really good data out of that. We could also actually just go into a brand new book because we've not done picture books in a while, and this picture book could invoke that kind of inference skill that we don't get in text as much.
But which one's right, Dylan? Which one's the right choice?
We could get some amazing data and some amazing lessons out of all of these choices. Yeah. So let's go deeper then into why we're going to pick them and what impact picking them will have. Because if we have lots of right options, but one of them is going to lead to teacher burnout and the other one's going to lead to teacher confusion because it's not quite cohesive, maybe we go for the third option then. Because actually the outcomes are going to be just the same, but the way we get there might be a way which is better for teachers and staff in general.
That's something that's been lost, isn't it? And yeah, do you know what? I hope Teacher Tapp carries. I hope you guys download Teacher Tapp as well. Like I do it every day. It honestly takes, like, I'm not even joking, it takes a minute. Yeah. Like, if anything, like less.
And like you said, the most powerful thing is you then get to see the data.
Yeah, I know. I love looking. So you can always look at the results tab at the bottom and see yesterday's. And sometimes I'm in the minority. But oftentimes,
sometimes you're wrong.
Sometimes, no, not wrong.
Not
in
wrong.
the minority. Thank you, Dylan.
Yeah.
I'm correct you there. Thank you. Sometimes I'm in the minority, and it does ground me though, because I'm like, okay, because it might be a privilege. It might be that I'm saying something like the question might, does this thing happen in your school? And I'm like, no, not really. And then I realize most people are saying, yes, this is a nightmare. It happens in my school, and it doesn't in ours. And I'm like, I should appreciate that a bit more. Perhaps.
And you might go on the internet and say, this doesn't happen.
Yeah, exactly.
No. It doesn't happen for you.
You're the minority.
Yeah, because you would be wrong to say this is where I'm going to draw this distinction of this comment, because the comment said, I don't think teaching hasn't changed much in 31 years.
Yeah,
I think it's down to resilience of people. If he'd said something like, from my point of view, what I've done over the years hasn't changed. That I can't argue with that. That's fine. Maybe for you it hasn't. But to say teaching has not changed over 31 years
statement
is just wrong.
Yeah.
It is just wrong. And then he called me blinkered for saying that we shouldn't put it down to resilience. And I was like, oh, can we not see the hypocrisy here of you saying it's not this massive thing. Nothing has changed at all.
Yeah.
So I guess, the point is teaching has changed. Your individual experience is incredibly important, but when backed up with thousands of people, we can get a wider picture of the general vibe.
Yeah, definitely. Brilliant. What I've learned is, as well, a joking point now, is that if we want more episodes out of this, just leave really annoying comments on our Instagram because Dylan will get riled up.
Do you know what?
We'll talk about it.
I've been so much better. But whenever people who are slightly older call the younger generation less resilient, I'm just like, I just can't resist it.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much. I really enjoyed that. Guys, leave us a review. That asked you earlier. Please do it. It really helps us.
They already have, Dylan. They did it at the start.
Oh, they did.
They did.
But we can leave 2 reviews for 2 kebabs. So get a different device. Get someone's device. Pick up your mum's phone or something.
And order a kebab.
Yeah, that's what we want.
That's what we
Wait,
want.
what did we want? Reviews or kebabs?
Kebabs.
Order a
Cheers.
kebab.
See you at the kebab shop. Bye.